Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Well, today we have none other than Dr. Doug Lisle, who will answer your question. If you want your question answered, you need to submit it in advance. And I'll put how to do it below in the show notes. But we get so many questions that he's never going to finish today. So I have good news. He's going to come back next year once a month, the first Tuesday of every month, for Straight Talk with Dr. Doug Lisle. Please welcome him to the show. Hey, Dr. Lisle, I almost called you Doug.
Just call me Doug, for God's sakes.
Well, I like to give you props when I can.
Sure.
We have so many questions. Let's just jump into them. The first question was submitted by two different viewers, one named Deb and one named Linda, and they're wondering what's happening with Beat Your Genes because they can't seem to find any new podcasts since November 3rd.
Okay. What happened is the young man that runs that for me, Dr. Nathan Gersfeld, had a major operation on his leg. And so he has been out of commission, and he knows he dropped the ball on this, but we actually did the shows, but they weren't uploaded. So the Beat Your Genes podcast there would have been today's Thursday, so there should have been a new live one that went last night. And so you'll be getting actually new shows instead of every other week. You're going to be getting them every week for the next several weeks because we got some already done in the hopper. So there you go. It was Nathan's ACL is the reason why that didn't happen.
Okay. People were just worried that maybe it went away. So we're glad to know that it's coming back.
No, all good. It just shows you that it's a little hokey operation and that one little ligament tear and one little miniature operation can wreck the whole thing. That's how it really works.
Great. Yeah, one little tear. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So the first question is from Cindy. When I'm at a restaurant, I'll ask the waiter questions about a particular dish to see if it fits into my dietary lifestyle. People have told me it seems demanding and that they would never ask so many questions. Is there really anything wrong with asking questions?
No, not at all. The truth is that you're a patron there. You're trying to make a decision on what it is that you're going to eat, and I would say that sequence is very different now than it would have been 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, I was very gentle, and I would actually, even in speeches that I did 20 years ago, I would tell people about the restaurant dilemma, and one of the things that I would say is that I call it the split brain technique, where we divide our personality into two different personalities, and we essentially the one that's doing the talking sides with the waiter, and the one that isn't doing the talking is the nutcase that the side that is talking is having to manage. So this is how it is that this is done. So when the waiter comes, you say, hey, listen, I just have a few questions. I'm a little bit of a health nut. Okay, so what can I say? Okay, do you guys? Is there any cheese on that? So by actually prefacing the conversation with, hey, I'm a little bit of a health nut, we are actually taking one half of our brain that is talking and it's criticizing the other half of us. That's actually what's taking place there. And so, i.e., I'm on your side against this guy that's inside of me that is the nut that is going to insist on asking these questions. Okay, the waiter or waitress, they cannot help but respond to that in kind of a relaxed, amused fashion that you are with them against you. Okay, and so that's a split brain technique that very effective if you need to use that. So particularly if you're in a group of people and you're worried about essentially a little cumulative feedback from the group, as the group feels the anxiety and the tension about how the waitress or waiter may start getting a little bit overwhelmed and upset, and therefore they feel like they have to be the other side of you, like, hey, she's not with us. We are reasonable people, and let us start leaking our frustration on our friend. Okay. And oh my God, she's just blah, blah, blah. Come on, Sarah, just it's fine. You know what I'm saying? So if that's what we don't want to put up with, then you lead with the split brain yourself. Because if you do that, the waiter or waitress will almost inevitably relax, take your shot, basically be very accommodating with that information. Okay, so that's how we do it, the split brain technique.
Split brain. Have you seen the TV show Severance?
No.
That's actually about a split brain technique,
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Okay, next question from Kelly. In past talks, you've said that we inherit our personality traits. Are we wasting our time trying to teach our children morals and values because their genes will dictate their propensity to act in a certain way? Do personality traits make certain people prone to things like drug and alcohol use and habitual spending? There's two questions in here. We're really trying to get them.
Yes. You're wasting your time trying to shape your kid's personality, give them work ethic, build character. It's all a waste of time. Okay. So all you want to do as a parent is hope to God that they don't get into drugs and alcohol, that they get anybody pregnant or become pregnant, and that they don't, essentially, and that they don't have any tragic accidents that take place and cause them to be mentally or physically disabled. Your real job as a parent is trying to protect against tragedy while you're trying to enjoy your own life and help them enjoy theirs. That's it. So parents can't help themselves. They're actually engineered by nature generally. Not all parents. It's a bell curve, but they're engineered by nature to try to have their kids be more competitive than the neighbor's kid. So they're designed by nature to push their children a little bit in competitive processes. A little bit of pushing in competitive processes never does anybody any harm. A lot of pushing in competitive processes can make a young person's life kind of miserable and filled with tension and anxiety, and basically an unpleasant feeling that their parents are kind of a warden that's looking over their performances and isn't very happy with things and it's never enough. You will never cause your child to be a high achiever by such tactics, because their propensity to achieve has to do with their native talent and their native motivation, both of which are genetic. Okay, so nobody had to push Mary Lou Retton. Mary Lou Retton was going to be Mary Lou Retton. In other words, whatever she was going to do, she was going to put a phenomenal amount of energy behind it. And that's how that works. Meanwhile, the other people that are more inherently laid back might even enjoy their life more than Mary Lou Retton, but we'll never know their names. They just enjoy their existence. So I've met some parents whose attitude towards their kids was, hey, I didn't do anything. I just enjoyed them. We had a good time. It's like, wow, what a cool existence for those kids. That's relatively rare. In other words, most parents are pushier than that. And like I said, a little bit of pushing is fine. That's part of what people are going to get in the work world for the rest of their life. But a lot of pushing that can come from competitive, conscientious, emotionally intense parents, that is unnecessary misery for all concerned. And so those people might be able to learn that this is actually they're misunderstanding the situation that they're up against, that this is a total waste of time. This includes parents who are in angst about their children's diets and that their children are getting fat, or et cetera, et cetera. So let me give you the facts of life on this. What you teach your children about eating and food will have absolutely no impact on their food choices the day they leave your house for the rest of their life. They will actually resort to their personal preferences, which is going to be genetic. Okay, so this is an incredible finding that you will find in Robert Plomin's classic called Blueprint. And so this is one of 100 extraordinary findings out of behavior genetics research. So the way they were able to determine this, and it has been determined, there's really it's more than one study, and it always comes up the same. And that is that if you have children that you adopt, those children may eat at your table and they eat what you force them to eat for 18 years. But as soon as adopted children leave their adopted home, their correlation coefficient, in other words, how much they match what their food behavior is as soon as they leave versus what it is that they did in the family home, is 0. It doesn't exist. It's gone. It's like, oh my gosh, we raised them with a lady who's AJ or Alan Goldhammer's equivalent, and we had them chopping vegetables and broccoli and steaming rice, from the time they were 3 years old, and that's what they ate. Doesn't matter. Okay. When they're 18 and they go off to college or wherever it is that they go, if their genetic parents ate pizza, drank beer, and ate French fries and never ate a vegetable, that kid won't be eating any vegetables. They'll be eating pizza and French fries. So yeah, this is contradicted by people's life experience like mine, where I ate a certain way until I was 17 or 18. And then Alan said, hey, we're making a mistake. And this is what you need to do. And so I paid attention. And then I read John McDougall's book when I was about 22. And I got it a little clearer. And then you might say, well, why did you change, Doug? And the answer is, it was in me all along. It was in me all along to be conscientious about my food. I just didn't know it. Okay. And so there's literally information that I didn't know. There was a day when Mary Lou Retton didn't know anything about gymnastics too. But as soon as she went to a little tumbling class, it's like, whoa, what's this? And so so those of us that are inherently, and by the way, I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about how extraordinarily stable human personalities are. And the truth is, from the time I learned this information, my diet then and my diet now, 40 years later, are about the same. In other words, I'm a very healthy eater, but I'm not at the level of Alan. And Alan is the same as he was when he was 19. He hasn't changed a bit. And so it's like, oh my God, he's, on the percentile of healthy eating, Alan's at 99.9. He's easily 1 in 1,000. And I'm probably at about 98 to the 99th percentile. In other words, I'm about 1 out of 50. So if we go through Chicago O'Hare Airport, somewhere in that airport, when I'm walking past something, there's some gal that's a member of AJ's group that's 1 notch healthier than I am. Okay, that's where I sit. And the interesting thing is, I've been at the same place for 40 years. Like, I've had brief periods of time where I went out to 99.9, very brief periods of time. So that has happened, but those then change, and I reel it back to the 98th to the 99th percentile, whatever that is. That's just me. Okay, so you're trying to get your kids to be harder workers, more conscientious, more upstanding, telling the truth, and be more honest as people, get better at math or reading. You're wasting your time. Okay, your job, or getting them to eat healthy food, getting them to exercise, get out of the sunshine. Yeah. No, this is not going to have any appreciable impact. So do we monitor the diets of young people? You bet we do. In other words, so we are trying to, for young people, trying to keep them out of dairy proteins to try to essentially meander our way around, reduce the possibility that we're going to wind up with an autoimmune disease. So we would not want to have to tell our child at 36, who now has multiple sclerosis, that, we knew that there was a connection back then, but we didn't want to take ice cream and cheese away from them because they liked it so much and they always squalled. It's like, you know what, too bad. You're just going to have to squall, and you're not getting any ice cream or cheese. And we're putting almond milk on our cereal. Okay, so that is the way we do that, so we don't have to have that conversation and watch our adult child go through some kind of hell. Okay, so there's a time and place to put our foot down, and there's a time and place to realize, hey, we're going to try to encourage some healthy eating. We're going to try to get some healthy food in you, but we know that we're not going to change your trajectory, that we want to expose you and then find out what you're willing to do. But at 18, all bets are off. So Your job as a parent is to have them enjoy their lives and have you enjoy yours. I also will say something else, and that is, we don't bend over to make their lives good if it makes our lives miserable. We don't do that either. Children have to be good roommates. So if I had a son that at 13 wanted to play the drums, I would tell him, okay, listen, you're playing the drums when I'm not around, when I go play basketball, and that's when you can practice. Well, I want to practice with my friends when they get, no, okay? You're going to play the electronic drum set that I can't hear. That's fine. But you don't get to bang on the drums and wreck my peacetime in my own house. No, that's not being a good roommate. Okay, so so children have to accommodate us, and we have to accommodate them in an appropriate sort of a yin and yang fashion. But one thing that we don't want is we don't want a tension inside our relationships with our children that I'm frustrated and I want you to be better, and I'm have a nervous tension about your competitive standing in the world, and you need to improve and be a better human. No, that is a huge fundamental mistake that many people make. A lot of people don't, but many people do. And all you do is have an alienation between yourself and your child, where they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to be honest with you, they're not happy, and they're walking around sullen and bitter. Okay. You haven't improved their personality or their functioning in any way by this. We've done is think of them as an employee. If you criticize an employee all the time, what would be your relationship between that and an employee that was under your supervision? Answer: they would be bitter and sullen, and you would not be good friends. Okay, so that's how we want to look at this. All right, I think that's enough, AJ.
Okay, great. So then when she says, am I wasting my time trying to curb someone's spending habits or trying to aid people in their sobriety? She is.
Yeah. In other words, yeah, you're not going to curb their spending habits. They're going to do what they're going to do. Don't let them do it with your money. Okay. So that's the crux of the matter right there. So I'm absolutely, because this sounds like we're talking about adult children, obviously. And so adult children, if they have bad spending habits and spend themselves broke, not a problem. You let them suffer. That's how that will enter their consciousness as a way of calculating their best interest next time around. When it comes to sobriety, those are individually different issues. So each case is going to be different depending upon what the person's assets are, how bad the addiction process is, and what avenues we may want to or be able to afford to put open to make it possible for them to get a space to get themselves sober. Okay, so there are times, and there are appropriate times and places where well-to-do people might spend quite a bit of money on a rehab for a child. Okay, there's also times when the right thing to do, no matter how well-to-do you are, that the right thing to do is to spend nothing. So I can't give you really good rules of thumb for that. I can just tell you that if you're in that dilemma, you should call me because I have good intuition now about clinically having been through that road many times. I just recently got feedback from somebody that they took my advice, and it was the hardest thing that they did, but things are working out.
Great, thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
The next question is from Diane. Question for Dr. Lisle. I'm an extrovert and my husband is an introvert. On many occasions, I feel he doesn't have my back. This is hurtful to me. However, I realize it's just because he hates confrontation. In my mind, it's unmanly. He's never going to change, so I must get over it, right?
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, interestingly enough, I had this conversation with a woman just recently in the last week or two. And she was recalling things that had happened 15 years ago, incidences where her partner didn't have her back, and it still sort of rattles around her skull. She's not sure what to make of it, even to this day. So it's interesting that this is, our partners. You are not one entity. You are two individuals trying to live your best life. And so there are conflicts of interest. There are also commonalities of interest that result in, a relationship being valuable. But that doesn't mean that there aren't conflicts of interest where something that's good for me is bad for you and vice versa. In other words, that is also the case. And so conflicts of interest are tricky. So and these are, we go through a negotiation process and I use the word broadly. In other words, we learn about what is the value of this partnership. I thought it was going to be a bigger backstop, for my social defense than it turned out to be, because it turns out he doesn't have my back, at least in this situation or that situation. So I think there's a few things that I would say about this. The person's personality is not going to change. That is what that is. The second part of it, though, is that sometimes we can oversimplify that, the evidence from a given instance or two, and essentially attempt to determine from those tea leaves what that has to say about the future. So we can overgeneralize what that means. So, for example, your husband may not stand up to you if you get into a conflict with family at Thanksgiving. He may split the brain his way. In other words, you're the freak that's out of line, and he's more reasonable and he takes their side, which can be infuriating. However, that doesn't mean that individual might not give you a kidney if you needed one. So the nature of how it is that they are behind you is a complex calculus that we are very very sensitive to public displays of whose team are you on. And the reason was that in political dynamics of a Stone Age village, these were extraordinarily important moments of determining whether you're on my ally team or not. Today, they're really not. There isn't any major political decision-making and major resources that are being divided along different kinds of lines within a village conflict. So it's a little bit different than that, and therefore we can overblow those things potentially. So, however, in answer to your question, two things that I would say. Number one, his personality is not changing. Number two, it's not so easy for you to, quote, get over it. So that's because your mind is running an unconscious cost-benefit analysis on what that behavior actually means as you project it out into the future. And so I would say that the following is also true, starting to be a mantra today. And that is, if you're troubled by this is another good person to call me. And that is because sometimes an objective third, basically a different pair of eyes on this, sometimes I can actually ask questions and try to get a feeling for the landscape of what that relationship looks like, and try to see whether or not your intuition, which is that you're frustrated and you're being unfairly treated, and that these are in fact little weak defection cues that you're experiencing, and you feel like you're on very soggy ground in this relationship as you move into your future. That would be one, and probably the worst case scenario interpretation that you might be making out of what is in fact a very narrow set of circumstances that have repeated themselves a few times, and they're causing you to make those inferences, but you're overgeneralizing them. And that sometimes what I can do is we can look more broadly at the notion of partner support and see that the person is actually getting a very solid score, and that essentially they're getting a C+ in math, but they're getting A's and B's everywhere else. And so if we can remind it of that and look at the whole whole situation as a gestalt, we might feel differently. Okay. So that is you might be able to do that for yourself, but sometimes it's useful to have somebody like myself who's been through this kind of a problem many times, and I can ask questions that can cause your mind to do its calculus slightly differently. And that, sometimes people are madder and more disgusted, and some people are happier and are less disgusted. I had one case I was talking about, I think on Beat Your Jeans, maybe it was here, I can't remember, about a lady that called me up. She was an older lady calling me up about complaints about her husband and wanting to know whether or not, her complaints were justified, really thinking about, should she even be thinking about leaving? And I listened to her and I asked her about 5 or 10 minutes worth of questions. And I said, you have a great relationship. Okay. She had been so spoiled in her life about what was in fact a spectacular relationship for 40 years that when she had a few little things to complain about, the truth of the matter is that in the grand scheme of things, that husband was a solid A. Absolutely first-class relationship. She was actually quite happy. I just wanted to know with these little things that she was kind of irritated about. She was sort of like checking with me because she had confidence in me. Like, should I be worried about this? Should I be annoyed about this? Am I getting shortchanged? What's the deal? And the answer is, that's called a relationship. That's a really good relationship that has some conflicts of interest that we have to negotiate. That's all it is. So she actually, 18 minutes later, totally happy woman. Like, good, I'm glad, because I didn't want to make a big fuss about this, and I didn't think I should, but I wasn't sure. And now she was sure.
Nice. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Here is a question from Andrea. I went whole food plant-based in February 2020, and I've been transitioning my kids age 8, 11, and 12 since then, and they're mostly whole food plant-based. My girls, 12 and 11, are very tall and have been more on the growth scale than their peers. They're about 30 pounds overweight, and they want to lose it. However, they lack impulse control. If they go to a birthday party with chips, cupcakes, and ice creams, they dive in head first. Even when we try to pre-game the event and talk about the temptations or have a healthy snack ahead of time, they just cannot resist. One thing that really bothers them is that they see all of their friends eat all that stuff and they are stick thin. They feel like they have been cursed and it's not fair. Dr. Lisle, you've always said life isn't even remotely fair.
Right. Yeah. You're getting to know me too well when you actually got it word for word.
Yeah.
So life is not even remotely fair.
Yeah.
So I think I probably told this story that a lady I knew, talked to extensively, was a fancy ecological scientist that worked in Africa on the problem of water. And so one of the things that she did was, and there are places in Africa where people live in huge dumps. They actually live in garbage dumps, and that's where they make their home. And so a big problem is, where on earth can they get any water? Water is an unbelievably precious resource there. And so in talking to her and learning about this, I was, it's one thing to sort of hear it from me, third person. It's like, oh yeah, you sort of theoretically know the stuff like that goes on in the world like that. It's another thing to hear to somebody who's been in there and has actually been there and lived in there with those people, done research on it, and is like struggling from some United Nations type of thing, try to do something about it, and then all of her frustrations. It's like, oh my God, I cannot believe that is the state of humanity. And certainly when we read world history, we see incredible sets of circumstances that people, not just today, but in all history, have had to live through. Life isn't even remotely fair. So your children have got more than their share of fat genes. Okay, so they did. So that a lot of people do. In fact, half of the population has above the average of fat genes. And so the your children, meanwhile, had all kinds of things happen to them that were more than fair. So they live a very good lifestyle where they're not struggling to get enough to eat. Their problem is that they're getting too much. So all is well in the world as far as I'm concerned. If you're a parent, you look at this and you understand that they're frustrated, and so you've done what you can to try to mitigate this by instruction. But we're finding out that it's not simple instructions, that we're actually watching the genetics of these girls as it runs its way through the current adaptive landscape and arrives at what the nature it is of their decision making. So all I can tell you is that your job is to do what? Keep them out of the dairy products as much as you can, so we're not having that discussion when they're 37 and they got multiple sclerosis. Okay, so that's the one thing that we're doing. Second of all, they're going to be frustrated about their weight. That such as life. We're going to tell them eat your vegetables and eat your rice and do the best you can and get some exercise, and oh well, okay. And they'll do that to varying degrees, and that's that. Now, what's going to happen is as they get a little bit older, they're going to get a little bit more worried about what boys think, because right now they care a lot about what boys think, but there's no real consequences about what boys think. Yeah, a few people are getting kissed, but not very many people. And so this is, it gets to be higher stakes when you're 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. That's when we're going to now change the environment again. So now we will have an environmental pressure on their nervous systems that is not there now. And that may improve their, quote, impulse control. Okay, so all impulse control isn't some magical characteristic of impossible capability to monitor. Not at all. The truth of the matter is impulse control is nothing other than the differences that we see between people in the way that they run a cost-benefit analysis on a problem. That's all it is. So, and that cost-benefit analysis can change as circumstances change, and circumstances in this case will change. So we'll find out, of course, that we don't know that they'll even like boys. I mean, I'm not supposed to be assuming that these days. But the bottom line is that whatever happens, their appearance will have higher stakes in the next 10 years than it has had now. And those higher stakes will have an impact on their decision making. How much of an impact, we don't know. But one thing we know for sure is that you're doing a good job educating them about the general things that would work and what direction to go. And that's all you can do. And after that, we just shrug our shoulders and say, yeah, life isn't fair. You know, that's why we call them skinny bitches. You know, that's what it is. It's like, hey, that's how it is. And so, but we educate them that this is ultimately under their control, but that it's hard. And, you know, they'll get to it when they get to it. And, you know, you can better believe that if one of them starts to get to it at some point and starts to make some headway, the other one will probably follow and does not want to be left behind. So we got a couple of shots at another major pressure, which is that if one of these girls starts to actually get it together, if she can, the other one, that creates extra environmental pressure on the other one to maybe get her act together. So you're doing everything you can, and that's all we can do.
Okay, so she says, do you have any advice to help my girls think about and deal with this dilemma? And do you know any resources for children that helps with whole food plant-based?
No. In other words, you're there. I'm not sure she's asking I think she's asking the same question. She's wrapping around the axle in the same way. Is there some way to change this pattern? You know what I mean? Is there resources, i.e. information? Is there some way to instruct them? Is there some way to cajole them or, you know, essentially push them this direction to help them develop more iron will? Now we're back to personality. Okay, i.e. is there some way that I can get my kid to like math? No, there isn't. Okay, so you're watching, obviously this is a problem of the modern world. There's no problem like this in the Stone Age. There isn't any processed food, so no kid is getting fat in the Stone Age. So this is the pleasure trap. and you are watching the psychological price, no big physical price. There's no big physical threat to anybody's survival being overweight, as a teenager. But there is a psychological price. It's not trivial, and you're watching that price. And all we can do is you can imagine how unfair and frustrating it would be if the children wouldn't know what to do if they got bad advice, which they always have. You're the one parent in 500 that can actually give your kids good advice. So you can give them good advice, and you can actually even set a good example and make it available for them. But this is the old, you can lead the kid to healthy, whole natural food, but you can't make him eat it. Okay, that's what this is. And so you do the best you can, and otherwise you shrug your shoulders and just say, hey, my attitude with this is, with kids and their frustration and et cetera, is to essentially say, hey, it's a hard thing to do, and you may not be ready to do it now, but you'll get to it when you'll get to it. In other words, yeah, it's unfair that other kids have it easier, but a lot of kids have it just as hard as you have it. So, that is the way it is. The good news is that we actually have the solution to it. And so we do have the solution. It's not one that's easy to do. Oh, well, but maybe you'll get to it when you're a little bit older, and when you're a little bit more determined. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. We'll just have to see what happens. No ego trap in that. That is a pitch. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. We'll see. We'll just have to see what happens. That's the ego. That's how we keep people out of the ego trap. And we also keep them out of another side to that, which is the self-pitying sort of, quiet personal frustration and frustration with the world, et cetera, and the giving up and the sort of unfairness of it all. It's like, yeah, my attitude is, hey, it's fair enough. So I don't want them wallowing in that. And I also want them understanding that we've got a solution, and they'll get to it when they'll get to it. It's like we just let that percolate in their nervous system. And that kind of concept, you'll get to it when you get to it, that we know what to do. I'm watching mom do it right in front of my face. I just can't do it. But no ego trap pressure. Like, well, you're not ready. You'll get to it when you get to it. It's like, rather than this is what you need to do, you should do this. I know, let's talk through all the things that you should do. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of ego trap. That's a lot of deep frustration that they are failing you in the program. Careful. We need to have a very Teflon attitude about this. Okay, so this is the nature of change is really about new information being integrated within the person's personality. What they can change to, what new space they can get to is unknown, but it has its limits. Jen Howk and I are actually doing a half-day seminar in February. It's called True to Life. So you can sign up for it, truetolife.us. It's $19.95. There's going to be an in-group people that come, but that's a very limited. It's going to be at a house in Virginia, but it'll be fun. Real simple, one camera. Jen and I will be up there talking, answering questions, but we're doing new presentations that people haven't heard. And the nature of change, how you can change, what you can't change. The nature of the life that is adjacent to the one that you have now, which we call the adjacent possible. There are things that are possible for you that are outside of what it is that you know right now, but we don't know exactly what your adjacent possible is. We know that it's there, but we don't know exactly what it is, but we also know that it's limited. Okay, so the adjacent possible, what you can change and what you can't change. We don't know exactly what that is, but we do know that it has limits. Okay, and so along that pathway, we want to support the person's self-esteem. So a third presentation in there is called the shoes and socks of self-esteem. The fundamentals of how it is that self-esteem works. And so this is, these concepts are all woven into this very question, which is why I'm bringing this up. That this is, to get a feeling not only, for your kids, but also for yourself, that, what can I do? How do I support my own ability to change? And that we're going to focus on a process of learning what the fundamentals are, and then staring at that thing and experimenting with it. Your children, for example, as a warning, one or both of those kids at times is going to stick their toe in the water and try to do a good job and see what happens. And you might get excited and hopeful, but you have to understand that may last for 6 days and then they quit. Okay. And when that happens, these are important little processes where our attitude should not be one of disappointment and then pushy encouragement. I'm not saying that this person would do that. I'm just saying that it would be normal for a frustrated parent desperately trying to help their child out of what is in fact a devastating social handicap, that would be pretty pushy about it. And this is where I would say careful about how we do this, that we don't want to push these kids into an ego trap. We want to be careful about how we try to help them orchestrate change. Our attitude should remain, hey, you learned something, okay? And, when you try next time, if you do, you may do things a little bit differently, but whatever, it's part of the learning curve. And that's what we call that. People don't learn to ride a bicycle well in a week. You don't learn to walk in a week, and you don't learn to talk in a week. These things take some time, and just circle it around and hit it again when you're ready. That's the attitude. So we don't want these kids feeling any sense of failure or impossibility when every now and then they take a run at it and they quit because they get slipped into the flush trap again. They inevitably will. What we're hoping for is that by 25, when they're older, when the stakes have been much higher, they're actually feeling the price of the handicap of being a genetically overweight person that is really struggling with this, that they've learned enough between age 13 and 25, and they've made enough attempts that one day they decide, you know what, I'm done messing around with this. Okay. I had this happen to a woman who was in her 50s. And at one day we might have her on your show, AJ. She's a woman of stellar credentials in education. And so during COVID, she's a mom of 3 kids and had gained a lot of weight in her early years behind this. And she decided when COVID came, she could sit at home and do the work that she needed to do for the school systems at home. And she was like, okay, I don't have any more excuses. I don't have any working lunches where I have to eat with other people. I don't have, a scatterbrained schedule that I can't control all the stuff that I have to do. Who are you kidding? If you're ever going to do it, now is the opportunity. And she took that opportunity, and she went from about 285 to about 145 in a year. That is incredible. It was an extraordinary transformation. And so anyway, the point is that she almost has to be looking at herself like, really? Why did I wait till I was 54? Well, I don't know how old she is. AJ, I'm going to get shot if it turns out she's 46. I can't guess. Maybe she's 50. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I'm just trying to think about all of her credentials and what she's done in this life, and I'm just guessing. But the point is that she let that sit for a long time. She knew a lot about health and nutrition for a long time. So when she was ready to make the move, she knew exactly what to do. She had just never really done it for real. Okay, so then she did it, and now she's gonna spend the rest of her life as a skinny bitch, as opposed to what she had to deal with before. So we would like these young women to get there by 25, not 55. So how are we going to do that? We're going to just stick a little cinnamon under their nose, make it interesting, make it intriguing, but not make it overwhelming. And that's how we're going to try to do it.
Great. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. This is from Cindy. Question for Dr. Lisle. I quit smoking over 2 years ago. Ever since then, I feel like I have an eating disorder. Not only do I eat food many times a day, but I feel obsessed with food and even eat when I'm not hungry, especially indulgent food. Is this a thing?
Yeah, no, it's not a thing. What we did was we uncovered your own natural proclivities about food and your own challenges with food by getting rid of the cigarettes, which the nicotine is a appetite suppressant. So these kinds of amphetamine-like things are appetite suppressants. So I had somebody tell me yesterday that they were getting pushed by their personal trainer into going to this doctor's office that gave injections of some kind of vitamins plus something that was going to help suppress their appetite and lose weight. The personal trainer swears by it. Well, I said, yeah, they're criminals. Okay, this is a widespread technique to essentially use probably legal amphetamines under really, really sketchy, nefarious circumstances, and it works. So people, you get people. I heard the whole story about how then the doses go up if you hit a plateau, and it's like, these are people that are selling literally injectable amphetamines and causing people to be addicts. Which people can be addicts for years and years and years. People can be an amphetamine addict for 50 years. They got a lot of problems, you know what I mean? But you can survive it and you can be thin. And there are people that are desperate enough that they are willing to do that, but they're not willing to do it oftentimes if they actually understood the situation about what is going on physically. So God knows what the question was. Oh yeah, you stop smoking cigarettes.
She feels like she can't stop eating.
You did the most important thing that you will ever do for your health. Smoking cigarettes is exceedingly difficult to accomplish. And that is by far the biggest, most positive thing that you could have ever done. So you should be patting yourself on the back for the next 2 years. And if the next 2 years you continue to have some sort of off-label, unhealthy, rich, junk vegan food come into your diet, call it fair for a while. Okay, you're on a journey that's going to take a while. You will eventually settle into the fact that, okay, this is how I am when I'm not, with my brain not being artificially stimulated by an appetite suppressant drug. Okay, so this is what you're now facing. You're now facing the realities of the modern pleasure trap. You're trying to do a good job and stay out of a lot of unhealthy stuff. That's good. The next move moves this toward, toward better discipline in your environment and better choices statistically over the course of your week or your month. That's all. So you're on the learning curve. You are a whole foods, plant-based rookie. You are early in the game, and that's okay. So stick with it. You're in the right place. You're getting preached to by the right pastor.
Great. Thank you. This is a question from Nat in Germany. And she said that you talked about depression, the cause having nothing to do with serotonin and only to do with negative life events. But why are there so many studies made on certain foods like fruits and vegetables that they say found out by eating specific foods like broccoli or berries or whatever help people with depression? Is there any truth in those claims?
I actually witnessed, I've seen the data from McDougall's work clear back when he worked with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota. And one of the most striking findings out of the 10-day program there was the fact that people were much less depressed. But that's confounded in the sense that they just got an experience where they have changed their diet and they feel better physically. And they were thinking that they were doomed to have their foot cut off, or to be obese, or to have a stent or bypass surgery, or to die an early death like their father did. So after learning that we actually don't have to go down that road, and that we have a bunch of healthy food prepared for us, and within a few days we like it quite well, because McDougall's food is really good. It's not as strict as Alan's food. So that's why I told you I'm a 98th to 99th percentile eater, because I'm more a John McDougall eater than I am an Alan Goldhammer eater. And so that's the difference. It's the difference between the 98.5 percentile and the 99.9. And between that difference, the food can be significantly more palatable to some of us. And so as a result, people were quite happy with the food, and they felt a lot better physically. Their blood pressure went down. They got off all their medications. They got rid of their cholesterol medications. They felt a lot better physically, and they had a tremendous amount of hope. Okay, and now it turns out that if you score their depression, it's way better. Okay, well, what are we calling that? Are we saying that somehow their biochemistry improved with this, and that their brain changed? No, what happened was they actually literally feel better physically because they were feeling sick before, and they also have hope that they didn't have before. So we have huge changes that have taken place both physically and knowledge-wise that have changed their perspective. And collectively, those things could lift people up quite a bit. So now what we want to do to answer this person's question, we would have to have a study that would say, for example, okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take people that are eating conventionally, 100 of them, and then we're going to randomly assign them to one of two conditions. We're going to shift one of their diets for example, for a little bit more cheese and a little bit less meat. And so in other words, so they thought they did something, you know what I'm saying? And then we put in brown bread, and we called that wheat bread instead of white bread, and we had them eat that for a while. So we have them do that inpatient for say 3 weeks. The other people, we say, okay, here's your diet for the next 3 weeks. You got the rabbit ears condition, so this is what you're eating. So now they're going to eat a bunch of really healthy foods. Now, at the end of 3 weeks, we're going to take people that aren't like moping around through gross obesity with all kinds of medications, wheezing for breath. No, let's take a bunch of 25-year-old people. Okay, so we're going to take 25-year-old people without any pressing health concerns that aren't under significant physical distress that could be cleared up in 3 weeks. And so as a result, we're going to do that, and we'll select those people for being on a score on a Beck depression inventory that they're depressed, mildly depressed, or moderately depressed would be better. Let's just say in principle that we could get 100 of those people, and we were to randomly assign them, and we put them on a college campus somewhere, and they can't interact with each other because one group is at Penn State during the summer in a dorm over there, and we're doing a workshop on I don't know, astronomy, okay, whatever it is. And then the other one, they're doing a workshop on astronomy too, and the other workshop over at the University of Pennsylvania. But those 50 in that group are eating the fruits and veggies. And now at the end of the 3 weeks, we want to find out who's happier as an average. Question is, do we believe that the people that ate fruits and vegetables and whole grains for 3 weeks are happier as a result of the biochemistry that has somehow shifted the biochemistry of their brain? Do we believe that that's true? Or is it turned out that there's no difference between those two groups? Now, I don't know the answer to that question, and neither does anybody else. Okay, so the research that you're referring to doesn't look at that. It looks at people that are eating more of that, whether or not they're happier. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? Because those people are more conscientious. They're probably healthier than the people that are not eating those things. Like, you've got confounds all over that research. Okay, so I don't know of anybody that has effectively a carefully crafted blind study. Remember that if we do this right, the people that got the vegetables in their diet, we wouldn't even make it all vegetables. We just improve it significantly. We say, well, one of the things we're doing here, we're going to have you exercise, and we're going to have you eat a little bit differently. We're going to change your diet. Okay, there's still some pork and fish in there and some steak, but it's less significantly. And we've increased the vegetable material in the diet from, the healthy vegetable material in the diet from 5% of their diet to 45% of their diet. So we've still changed it. Okay. But now we sit back and we look 3 weeks later. Do we think that there's a significant difference? Would we anticipate it? I would not. In other words, I think that the moderate or intermediate level depression that those people are feeling is not the result of some biochemical imbalance in their brain that's driving that at all, that it's in fact their life circumstances. That is the point of depression. The point of feelings is to actually orient you to the realities of your survival and reproductive problems. That's what they are. So if you're walking down an alley and you hear a little tin can rattle and you feel anxious, that is a thing to try to aid your survival. You're like, whoa, what is that? A big ugly rat? Or is it a thief? Or what is it? Okay, so whatever it is, I don't think I like it. That's what that is the purpose of all feelings, is to cause that. Okay, so when you bite into a fruit, you shouldn't be saying, oh God, oh God, I can't stand the taste of sweet. No, you should be liking it if it's fresh fruit and it tastes good. Why? Because that's a feeling that tells you that that's something that's profitable for your survival. Okay. When you see a good old friend that you haven't seen in 2 years and you meet them at the airport and they look good and they give you a big smile, that's supposed to cause you happiness, because that's telling you that you've reconnected with a member of your coalition and therefore you've increased your likelihood of survival. Okay. Somebody that you think is cute starts flirting with you, it's supposed to cause moods of happiness inside the system. Your feelings are not random. They're not happening for no reason. Now, the truth is that because the brain is a biochemical computer, it turns out that if we put chemicals in it, we can change its functioning. Like we put heroin in it, we can change its function. Okay. So if we actually poison the brain, we can cause disruption. But we would say, okay, but normally speaking, if the thing is not being poisoned, and steak and fish and chicken and pizza and Coca-Cola are not poison. Okay, they are not grossly disrupting the biochemical features of the brain and its job at all. If you think that's true, how on earth are they getting anything done in Silicon Valley? Those people aren't eating anything intelligent. Okay, so no. So the truth is that to cause a very extraordinary event like a feeling, which is a really complicated thing to engineer biochemically, in order to do that, it's not. It happens. Your feelings are highly principled. So if you eat an orange and you don't suddenly feel jealous, that didn't happen. What you eat some popcorn and suddenly you feel angry? Of course not. Your feelings are extraordinarily sophisticated and they are directed at exactly the kind of survival and reproductive problems and feedback that you would think they would be. So depression is the mechanism that nature has developed in animals to tell them that their efforts at important goals are failing. That's what it is. Okay. You have something where you haven't failed so much that you're completely quitting. That's called frustration. That's a different feeling. It's got little elements of depression, but it's not depression. Like, it's angry, like it's unfair. Okay. But then once you're defeated because you work really hard at every way you can and you aren't able to achieve something that you think that you should, that's depression. Okay. So depression shouldn't come from a bad diet. Now, a bad diet could cause a bunch of health problems, sleep apnea. Now we're not getting enough sleep. And now what? Now we've got a poisoned brain because the metabolic processes of mental functioning, being awake too long and not being asleep enough cause disruptions. And now that person can have emotional fallout from that. Sometimes people will go through processes, menopause or their period, or in other words, there's times when, they could be bipolar disorder. They could go through periods where there is chemical alteration in the brain functioning, and it is causing more turbulence in people's feelings. That's true. Okay. But as a matter of a course, the overwhelming of all majority of all depression that any human beings have ever felt it has been the result of failure feedback, because that is in fact the biological purpose of depression. So I would never expect that changing someone's diet to a healthier diet would somehow change their neurochemistry to the point where they would shift from being depressed to not being depressed. That makes no sense to me from the standpoint of any theory of evolution. Okay, so that's like saying I'm in grief over my girlfriend dumping me, but I'm going to change my diet from the so-so diet that I've been eating to a healthier diet. That should get rid of my angst and that should get rid of my pain. Or I just lost the Super Bowl and I'm devastated over some mistakes that I made and let the team down. But you know what? I'm going to do this next week. I'm going to go eat really healthy food. That's going to fix it. Of course, it shouldn't fix it. It shouldn't have anything to do with it. Okay, so if the person is in a toxic state mentally as a result of the state of their brain from something that they're eating or doing, that could cause depression, but that is not going to be anywhere close to the most typical cause.
Thank you, Dr. Lisle.
Very good question. Really good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really good answer too.
All good.
Okay, so Renee wants to know, she says, it's about parenting. She says, I've heard you say that children are not wet cement, that we parents do not shape who they are with parenting, which is contrary to popular belief. But don't we as humans all have mirror neurons, and our young kids' brains very malleable? So when they're little, what we model will have an influence on their behavior?
Yeah, that's misunderstanding what mirror neurons are. Okay, so let me sort of explain that people are capable of learning, and what makes them capable of learning is something called memory function. So you can think of, for the moment, you can sort of imagine an animal that has no memory, and so what it has a sensory system that's sort of swimming through the ocean. It has a sensory system that can pick up features in the environment, and it also has a universal species typical calculating mechanism called its brain that can know whether something that it experiences is dangerous or good. So let's suppose it's a funny kind of a fish, and that fish, what it does, it just swims around and it looks for things, and when it sees something that it knows that is good to eat, it feels excited and goes and eats it. When it sees something that it knows that it's dangerous, it escapes it. In other words, it does things to escape. Now, it didn't have to learn any of those things. Okay, so it genetically already knew what things were food, and it also genetically knew what things were predators. And you might say, well, how could it know? And the answer is, oh, you can know. If you are a rabbit, you cannot learn that a fox is dangerous. You already have to know that anything that looks even remotely like a fox is dangerous. So those are not learned things. So you could have a rabbit that would simply be running around a landscape. It would know that going down into a rabbit hole is a good idea. It wouldn't know why. It didn't learn how to do that. It just does it. And so when it sees a hole, or if a fox starts chasing it, it runs into a rabbit hole. Okay, so that's all good. But the problem with that is, if that's all you have, it is extremely inefficient. So you can improve the functioning of that animal by incorporating a thing called memory. So that memory is a rabbit that's running from a fox, but now actually remembers where there is a rabbit hole. It's like, oh, that's really good. That way you're just not running and looking for a rabbit hole and trying to find one. You actually know exactly where you're running, and you're going the shortest distance between those 2 points. So memory function is an extraordinary feature of our environment that, a feature of our mind's functioning that massively improves our efficiency. So if that rabbit had found carrots yesterday in a meadow, after 3 hours of searching, it doesn't have to search those same 3 hours today. It goes right to where the carrots are, remembers. Okay. So we are capable of learning. And we're capable of learning through direct experience. The rabbit finds the carrots. But we're also capable of learning by watching other people and what they do. And that's where mirror neurons are so fancy. So we can watch somebody else swing a golf club, and then we can actually, our mind can experience that vicariously and get a feel for what that movement is and how to do it. And now we can imitate it pretty well. Okay, we can do that. And so, in fact, the famous golfer Phil Mickelson, I believe his dad was a pro, and his dad would swing in the garage, or practice when they were when Phil was 2-year-old, and Phil picked up a club and actually mimicked his father. And interestingly enough, because he's looking at his father, watching his father while he's doing it, in order to swing the same way, Phil had to swing left-handed instead of right-handed, because it's the mirror image. And so as a result, Phil Mickelson, even though he is right-handed, became a left-handed golfer. That's how he practiced that step, by actually literally a mirror image of his dad's swing. So anyway, mirror neurons we can also experience what other people are experiencing emotionally. That's the biggest place that we see the impact of mirror neurons on human functioning. Wouldn't make any sense to watch a movie if we didn't have mirror neurons. It's like, well, what do I care what that guy's going through? What do I care that he's kissing that girl or he got dumped? It's like only by mirror neurons do you put yourself in their situation and you feel what they feel if they're a good actor. If they're a lousy actor, you're like, I don't buy that. Okay, but if you watch a Jack Nicholson, you can almost not help but be feeling what it is that he's feeling, or feeling what other people are feeling about him. He's so expressive. So, but mirror neurons also work in terms of motor function, in terms of being able to copy other people's movements quite well, even just by observation. You can see what they do. Now, so memory. So what memories are is they're improving our understanding of the adaptive landscape. They're increased information that goes into the calculus of our behavior. But they do not change our personality. So our personality was already fixed. It's part of the universal calculating system that some people like loud noise and a bunch of people at a party and other people don't. So it wouldn't make any difference if you're extroverted and your 6-year-old daughter is introverted, that you took her out to parties and then you were out laughing and have a good time, and she's watching you laughing and having a good time. She might have a little bit of a mirror emotional feeling like, well, at least I'm relieved mom's happy, that's okay. But she herself would also be perceiving the direct environment. In other words, you can't get that excited and have a great taste in your mouth when you see somebody else chomp into something that you know is tasty. You sort of know what they're going through, and you might be motivated to go over and get a bite of whatever it is if it's available. But the truth of the matter is you're not experiencing it. Okay? So your 6-year-old daughter watching you have a good time at the party is not having a good time at the party. She can see that you're having a good time at the party, and she feels a little bit of a vicarious relief or happiness that you're okay, but it's not a big deal. And you sure as heck aren't getting her to copy you, because the reason you're having a good time at the party is that your universal value system in that reaction, that's innate to you. Another way to explain this would be every mom, stabbing a chunk of broccoli and eating it, and telling your 6-year-old daughter, it's good. Listen, mommy loves that. And the kid tastes it herself and it's like, nah, I don't like it. You're like, no, come on, you have mirror neurons. Hey, can't you learn to like it? And the answer is no. No, they can't. Okay. They might be kind of curious and puzzled that you like it, but they will be steadfast that they absolutely do not like it. Why? Because they have their own innate calculating system. They have their own sensory inputs, and that calculating system says, nope, that's bitter, I don't like it. I have a gene that mom doesn't have that makes me taste broccoli as bitter, and it doesn't matter how many times I look at you and how many people. I could have 1,000 people in front of me telling me it's great and smiling and encouraging me, and it will not change my experience. Okay, so that's the story. You can't change them. So our job is to understand that these are little individuals and to be paying attention to their preferences, and where it's appropriate, let them run their course. And when it's not appropriate, we're a parent and we tell them no. And that's how we do it.
So I guess we can't change anyone.
All you can do, AJ, the change that is possible, this is, the kind of things that we'll talk about in detail at our seminar. Also, if people can't make that link work, jenhowk.com, that's JENHOWK. Her ancestors didn't change it to HAWK like they should have, so it's jenhowk.com. She's also got a thing in her about the seminar in her little pull down menu. But the point is that the change that you can make is when there is new information that would alter your unconscious cost benefit analysis. So the change that I was able to make in my diet was because I got a new understanding of my relationship to the environment when I learned about John McDougall and Alan taught me about food. Okay, and then I tried it, and it turned out that the cost benefit seemed very worthwhile. And so I was willing to make a certain amount of changes, and then I wasn't willing to do it what Alan was doing. And so I was willing to do it 80% or 90% or whatever it was, but I'm still me. And we're finding out that was the change that I was willing to make. Thank goodness. I give Alan all credit for this, and I tell him thank you from time to time, because had I not done that, I'd be in very different condition now at 63 than I would have been had I eaten conventionally my whole life. I'd already had an appendicitis at 13 years old from way too rich a diet, and just whole things were not good. I was stepped up every morning because I was eating dairy products, and it would take till noon before I could breathe clearly. So I know that my dad died of congestive heart failure. It's like all kinds of that. I was not immune to the problems of the pleasure trap and the disease of civilization that our great doctors have talked about. So so I am super glad that I got exposed to that. However, had I been like other people, I've been somewhat different genetically, more inherently open and more inherently sort of self-indulgent, less responsible, et cetera, and more subject to social influence, it wouldn't have made any difference to expose me to that information. Okay, so it would have been like, okay, well, whatever, forget it. I'm eating pizza and drinking beer, and that's what I would have done. So you never know. That's why we want to expose people to information, and then we see what uptakes. This is one of the puzzles of people that have been involved in the whole plant-based movement. The McDougalls and the Campbells and the Esselstyns and the et cetera. They don't know this, but they're actually laboring under a pretty extraordinary egocentric bias. And that is because it came to them without too much of a fight. They believe that this is a characteristic of humanity, that if humanity was exposed to this, that they would do it. And the answer is no, they wouldn't. Okay, this is the extraordinary thing that is not understood in the whole foods plant-based movement. Everybody that has done this and made this change, so many people want to become evangelists about it, make a career out of it, because they want to share it with other people because it was so valuable for them. And they believe that, hey, had I not been exposed to it, I wouldn't have done this, and I was able to do it, and it had this incredible change. Yeah, but that's because you are an unusual genetic specimen. Okay, you didn't know that. Well, I'm not so unusual. I'm pretty conscientious, and I'm pretty smart, and I'm pretty this, and I'm pretty that, but I'm not anything unusual. Oh, yes, you are. You don't know that your characteristic personality around dietary preferences and impulse control about that is genetic. You would not have known that. You think that that's a universal characteristic of humanity when they get educated, but it is not. It is actually a personal, unusual characteristic of the people in our genre, in our arena. Now, are there millions of people that could join us and don't know? Yeah, there are, okay? But are there hundreds of millions of people that if we pounded it down their throat, it wouldn't make any difference? Yeah, okay? The vast majority of Americans, so 335 million Americans, there are probably less than 10 million that could ever eat a very healthy diet. that 325 out of 335 million Americans is doomed to a life in the pleasure trap by virtue of their genes. Okay, that is that is a complete revolution in thinking around this problem, and yet that is actually what the truth is.
Well,
So,
Dr. Oh, sorry.
we do the best we can.
We actually have a question about that magical last 10%. We'll save it to last time. We can end now, or would you mind one quick question from the chat, because it's from our friend Linda?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so Linda says, would it help to make the animal connection by taking younger kids to visit a farm sanctuary to pet and hold rescued animals?
I don't think so. In other words, I think that the people that are mainly or significantly vegan because of animal rights issues, that is again a matter of a personal discovery process, not a developmental education process. So once again, the question Linda's asking is another face of the very same thing that we've been talking about today. And so my experience with animal rights vegans is that it took nothing for them to make this change. In other words, the vast majority of them, it's literally an epiphany. It's like, it's like being struck like a bolt of lightning from the heavens. It's like, oh, I never made that connection. Now that I make that connection, I'm done. As soon as I see that even a fish, wants to live and has feelings, and I see a little chicken, and then I realize, oh my God, I'm eating that chicken. It's like, no way, it's the disgust reaction and the horror of it is overwhelming, and very often they will literally flip a switch overnight. Okay, and they think that it is an enlightenment and a value judgment and ethical process that is universal to humanity. And they don't understand, no, it's not universal to humanity. It was a characteristic of you. You just discovered a characteristic of yourself. You did not find an enlightenment for humanity. This is an extraordinary difference of a way to interpret what this process is. This is why you can be an animal rights activist, and in your own house, it doesn't matter how many John Robbins videos you pound down your children's or your parents' throats. They're not changing. And by God, come Thanksgiving, they're eating turkey and ham, and they don't want to hear anything about it. Okay, it's like they're not working with the same psychology, personality-wise. They can separate out. Human beings have been killing animals for thousands and thousands, for 1 million years. Actually, probably 2 million. Human beings have had domesticated animals for at least 10,000 years. So they have the capacity to feel the mirror neurons and feel the oxytocin and the bonding and the love for animals. But that doesn't mean that they can't separate that out and say, yeah, but the meat that I'm eating here or whatever else that we went and killed, that's fair game. But when it comes to my dog Rover here, oh my God, I'll kill you if you hurt him. So that kind of separation, and whether or not people are completely comfortable with that separation, that's natural to those personalities, and it is not a developmental process to get to the quote enlightenment of the animal rights vegan. That's either in you or it isn't. Okay, so that's actually potentially a useful clarification for people to know.
Yeah. Somebody's asking about the pleasure trap being in a Bookshare format for the blind, but it's on Audible. So I would imagine that, even though it's not like where they can have it in Braille, they can listen to it because it is on Audible. So
on Audible with AJ, who did an incredibly good job.
Yeah. And I had to call you like every 5 minutes. How do you pronounce this word? You guys
that I didn't know how to pronounce, but I knew how to use it in a sentence, but I didn't know how to pronounce it.
You guys use some big words. Well, Dr. Lisle, we are thrilled that you're going to be coming back the first Tuesday of every month, which means you follow Dr. McDougall, who's going to be the first Monday of every month. So that's going to be a terrific lineup. And I'll just save these questions for next time.
Fantastic, AJ. Thanks for having me.
Oh my God, it's always a pleasure. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Another doctor tomorrow. You must get those questions in for The Doctor Is In with Dr. Ron Weiss.